Well, it's that day again. Happy Friday to you. So, another Geospatial 2.0 Friday talk. This one, interesting title, Sharing 2.0 Secrets. Where might we go here? Let me start in a similar way I started the last talk last week. I just wanted to share one of the thoughts of the day that I put out there this week in Twitter and in LinkedIn. This one, again, I'm trying to be a little provocative here, but this one met with quite a lot of interest. There's over 3,000 views if you look right there, and more coming, and lots of comments. So quite interesting. And what I wrote, if you can't read that, is, so why does GIS remain a niche technology? Is it because we have a legacy perception of value with a fixation on maps? Don't we simply use a geospatial lens to solve business problems? Again, if you've watched any of my Friday talks, you know my sense of where maps are in our bigger conversation. They aren't front and center. They should never lead our conversations as they have done historically. So I kind of wrote that, was interested in people's thoughts. Some agreed, some disagreed. Go to LinkedIn if you want to see that conversation. Okay, that has relevance to what I'm going to talk about today. So I showed this slide last week. Really, the Geospatial 2.0 conversation has two parts. It has on one side the technology and the data, and we know we've got now to a place where we have much more data than we used to have 5, 6, 7 years ago, thanks to mini sensors, and we can also analyze that data in a different way. So we've got artificial intelligence, we've got machine learning to do that work. But the business conversation remains challenging. It's been challenging historically for the geospatial and GIS industry, and it's also now challenging for those that are sort of entering that world, the new startups that are part of this sort of Geospatial 2.0 world. So it's really, how do we talk to people in the business world about the value that this stuff brings to them? And that's where the challenge is, and that's really what I'm going to talk about today. So let's just move into what I believe is this separate worlds coming together. I think my world's always been GIS right there. There are other disciplines, so there's lots of experts in GIS. I mean, again, 25 years in GIS has been sort of my focus and my expertise. But there are also experts in remote sensing, people that work with Earth observation data and process that, particularly imagery, increasingly now SAR. So we've got those guys. And we've also got the CAD and BIM people that are working in their own space as well. Again, the glue that fits us together is the fact we're all working with location data ultimately. So those worlds are coming together. So, telling data-driven stories. I think it's really important that we move away from our conversations, as we have done, talking about technology and data. There's an echo chamber that we form, particularly in GIS, where we talk GIS talk that really nobody else understands or cares about. So if we're going to engage with business folks, we need to start thinking about how we tell data-driven stories. So the first thing we need to understand are workflows. We need to understand what people are actually doing, what problems and challenges they've got, and then we need to fit into the stories driven by data. And again, when we talk about pulling these worlds together, this is how we do this work. So again, I've shown this before and discussed this before. This is basically around safety engineers in DOTs and their workflows and how they diagnose problems around collisions, and particularly their focus on death and serious collisions, injuries. So what I did years ago was to actually build this out with some other folks, this story, and it struck me when we did it that we can take this data and tell stories around these workflows. So in this case, two-dimensional data, the centerpiece of GIS has always been patterns. So patterns is a great way. We could load a load of data on a map, and we can see that the patterns of that. What that data brings out, and we're wired to understand images, so we're really good at seeing. In this case, we've got heat maps and we've got clustering, so safety engineers can see the most problematic areas very quickly in a particular city. But the next stage of that would be really to present that data in a three-dimensional way, so as if that person was standing on that street corner. We can do it digitally, so that's where we get this sense of place. And when we talk about digital twin, that's ultimately, to me, what that actually means. So we can actually load that data, that view in with other data sets, so we could enrich that data with GIS data. So again, we get a better experience. Rather than having to drive out to the intersection, we can see it digitally and have other data sets there to help us make that diagnosis. The third piece is change, and that's real-time data, so we can actually see traffic moving through the intersection, we can see pedestrians. So in this case, we're really forming an end-to-end story in a digital way, leveraging geospatial data to help safety engineers move from trying to understand a problem to actual full diagnosis. So the power of data is absolute, but we don't talk about data on its own, we talk about data as part of a story. And I think we need to sort of drive in towards that and not think about our sort of narrow worlds that we have inhabited historically. So it's, again, bringing things together. So this one is relatively new to the conversation. I've mentioned it before, but Geoenablement, really essentially I'm talking there about embedding geospatial in all business decisions and activities. And if there's anything that I'm sort of focused on, it's that statement. So let's just break that down a little bit, what that means. So on the left side of the diagram, we've got this sort of notion of geospatial objects. And in GIS, that's points, lines, and polygons. We represent features in that way, and data stored in databases in that way. So a point might be a lamppost, a line might be a river, and a polygon might be a park, or etc. So that's how we represent things in a GIS. In 3D world, we have models, we have 3D models, and they could be a BIM, it could be part of BIM. In the IoT world, which is part of the world of change, sensors we've got there, all these sensors which are feeding back information on current state. That might be things that are moving, that might be things that are stationary, and what that state is. So we've got these data feeds that are coming in. So fundamentally there are two parts to that. There's first of all the location, or the geometry as we call it, and there's also the attribute. So those are sort of the core pieces that make up that sort of geospatial object that we've got. So we can do a lot of things just with that information, and that's really what we've done in GIS and again in these worlds that we've inhabited. But where we actually really bring value is by geo-enabling business systems. So I've got on the right there, the kind of business systems I'm thinking about is SAP, Maximo, Salesforce, document management systems, images and video, on and on and on. Now, that's all well and good talking about that stuff, but what does that actually mean in reality to the bigger conversation here? One of the things that struck me is the way that we can actually, the challenge that we've had, particularly in GIS, is getting GIS out of the mapping department. And there's been a lot of focus on the Geospatial Manager or the GIS Manager to try and do that. That's not really his job title. It's not really, you need almost a different role, as people have spoken about. But there's a bigger challenge to actually going through that path. It's my belief that actually the way that we really get business folks to start leveraging geospatial is to embed it in existing business systems. So if they're using SAP and Salesforce and these other business tools, if we embed the power of GIS within there, they will start leveraging that additional ability to create insight for themselves. Almost as a sort of a seamless thing. So I believe that Geoenablement is a massive part of the Geospatial 2.0 story, and how we're going to get geospatial, again, in front of these folks and actually leveraging and using this stuff. So I'm going to finish off with one more slide. Now this is very close to home for me. This is part of the Critigen, one of the products that Critigen have generated or built, and it's called LIMA. It's a mobile product. It's really about asset management, or EAMs. And what LIMA is really bringing together SAP and Salesforce and Maximo and other business systems in a single interface with ArcGIS. So you'll see there in the picture essentially a work order, which is part of the business system, and the GIS there as well. So this is a very simple geo-enablement of really field workers. So folks that aren't GIS or experts in the geospatial field can actually go out and use this to get their work done. And it's really built around their workflows, and it brings together these different systems to help these guys get their jobs done. So this is a really good example, and I use that again. It's one I know very well. So this I use this as sort of a good case study as to really what I'm talking about here is to bringing the world of geospatial to a much bigger audience. It's field staff and activities in the field. It's business leaders who are trying to make decisions we have to bring geospatial into that world, and how we best do it, I think, is leveraging Geospatial 2.0 and some of the new data and analytics that come with that, and then also really embedding this into these business systems. So there's my Friday talk. I am Matt Sheehan. That beautiful picture again. And if you want to reach me, have thoughts, comments, any feedback, that's my email address. And have a wonderful weekend. And we will talk again next week. Thanks very much.